Hello and welcome to Emerald City Comic Con Paint and Potion Tavern Edition. I am Beverly the Artist, and this is our second design, Tree of Stars. First, I want to talk a little bit about brush care. Oh, and I wanted to say, if you're coming to us from other than Comic-Con, from far away, I am recording today from the Anne Grace Hub, which is my home base in Bremerton, Washington. So a little bit about brush care. After you've used the brushes, the acrylic paint dries fairly quickly, so you're going to want to wipe off the excess on your napkin and then store the brushes in the water. The reason you brush off the excess paint is to keep your water fairly clean so you can keep using it for thinning down your paint. Except for the tiniest brush, the little brushes don't have enough substance to hold up their weight, and if you leave them stored in the water, they will get bent over time, and so they will not be fun to paint with. So I'm going to start with probably this size brush is a good one, and I'm going to be working now. Let me just say first that you can do whatever design that you want. This is your fun time. I'm not the boss of you, but I'm just going to show you how I do what I do. And I'm going to do this kind of sunset design, kind of a sunset. In some ways, I think it kind of looks like maybe there's a volcano exploding from the back, but I also call it Tree of Stars. So there's this, stars in the tree, stars in the sky, stars down on the ground. But I'm going to start with the sunset behind. This was printed on an inkjet printer, and so the ink itself can come loose and get kind of muddy with the loosening of the paint. So I'm going to show you how I go up to it without smearing the ink itself. So I'm going to get a little bit of white on my brush and mix it with a bunch of yellow just to lighten up that yellow and make it a little bit opaque. Now when I come up to the line here, I can overlap the line, but I'm just going to show you what you don't want to do, and that is this, because if you just smear it in there like that, you can make, if you loosen up the ink, you can make it smudge in and make your smudge up your paint. But it's not a big deal. If it does do that, you can go over it later with some white to cover it up. But I just go up to the line, but we're gonna just build in some yellow here. I'm gonna try to work fairly quickly for you. And we're gonna do kind of a circle. Yeah, but what you don't want to do is just do a whole big smearing of circle around there like that, because that can just activate that ink and make it kind of a smeary mess for you. So we're just gonna create this circle glow of a sun. Yeah, see, it's kind of activating that ink, making it smudgy. The trick with this composition is remembering to get between all of the branches. I have done it several times and found that sometimes I'll forget to get in between one of them. And so that's what I got to remember as I'm going through. So after you've done a layer of yellow, and you want to go outside of where you want that layer to go, because when you come in with the next color, you're going to overlap it. So go farther out than you want that yellow to go. So if you want the yellow glow to end here, then you go out here. If you want it to end here, then you go farther out. So then I'm going to grab some of this kind of orangey color, which is actually just a deep yellow, and come and overlap that a little bit and blend them together a little bit. You can do the same thing where you add a little white to it for that, a little bit of opacity. If you don't know what opacity means, opaque means not able to see through. It's the opposite of transparent or translucent. If you can see through it, it's transparent or translucent. If it's opaque, you can't see through it. I find that the brush wants to keep creeping up on the back end of my brush. So what I do is I kind of smush it down onto the palette and then grab it again with the end. So I want to keep the paint up at the tip so it's easy to control, and then I kind of pet it onto, and I like to make sound effects. I like the flat brush because you can turn it this way to lay the paint down quickly, and you can turn it on its side to get into these little narrow spots, and you can use it straight up and down to make fine lines. So it's a very versatile little brush. I will often use the same little flat brush to do an entire painting. With acrylic paints, you're going to want to aim for 2 coats of paint on every area. Not always. Sometimes it's fine to have that brushy look. But you really want to make sure that every area gets coated well so you don't have any white spots where the canvas shows through. So get good coverage at this stage. Okay, next bit, let's grab some red, just a little bit of red. Yellow is a very weak pigment, very transparent. It doesn't take a lot of red to overwhelm it. So if we're going to make an orange, a little bit of red goes a long way. So now I'm going to make kind of a horizon line because I don't want to accidentally make my glow go all the way around and forget to make my horizon line. So let's say about here is where my horizon's going to be. Because it's okay for my tree to kind of mound up a little bit, and you can decide, but we don't want it to be halfway through. It's just a good rule of composition to not have your horizon be in the middle of your canvas. So the way that I kind of measure, without having a tape measure with me, is to lay my brush down here, make a mark here, and then come to the other side, hold it in the same place, lay it down there, and make another mark there. That way I know that they're even. Just a back and forth motion. Do they absolutely have to be even? No. But if you want them to be even, that's one easy way to do it without having a ruler or anything. And then I'm kind of coming up, imagining that there's some little hills or something, because I want to have that kind of bowl shape, which kind of gives me the illusion that the like this is the focal point here. So we've got that movement here, that kind of flow, which turns the attention to this subject right here. I'm blocking these little mountains here. Okay, now let's put the rest of this kind of, let's say it could be a lake of fire, it could be just a reflection on the water, but it's only going to go down because we don't want it up in here in the roots. We just want it to come down here on the sides of the hill, and we can have the side of the hill come farther if we want, but in my little world here, this tree is on a mound. Oops, I've got a brush here. Is on this little mound, standing on its own. There we go. And we will come in and add more details in a minute. So now we're bringing in that orange. See how the red overwhelmed it? I like to take a deep breath every once in a while just to remind myself to stay relaxed. And just kind of work that in there. You can use the lighter yellow to blend the two. At this point, I wouldn't use water to blend them. I would just use the lighter yellow, and if you have too much red on there, wipe it off on your paper towel. You can clean your brush and dry it, because water is going to scrub it off and make it look too white. Use the yellow to blend if that's the look that you're going for. These are the peculiar little tips and tricks of working with yellows and oranges. There, that's a nice little orange right there. Getting in between all those branches. And some of these areas are going to be covered up, so don't stress too much about having it be perfect. Like I say, kind of like the pirate law, more like a set of guidelines. And you'll also have the tree branches that you can use to come in. But what you don't want is to leave so much white space that you have to make those tree branches really thick. So get pretty close up there. It's fine to overlap. If you're following along from home, you'll hear the scritch, scritch, scritch of the brush on the canvas. I find that very therapeutic. We won't be able to hear that in the tavern with the sea of humanity. Okay. Now I'm going to wipe off any excess, leave that guy in there, and come on to my biggest brush. Dip it, just the tips of it in the red. And now is when I'm going to really define my mountains. Just a little wiggle, wiggle, wiggle back and forth. And then get back in there. Use that paint to kind of glue those bristles back together. Okay, just a little bit. Okay. Okay. Now you see this back and forth to give this. There we go. Now we're getting there. And come back in with some of that orange to give a little bit of extra wiggle there. Okay. You can hear my rolly chair. Okay. And I gave you this piece of paper underneath so that you can paint all the way to the edge. All right, very good. Now we're going to do this red. We don't want to go too far up because we want plenty of room for our blue sky. So right about there. Mixing it with yellow, not with water, if we want it to be more blendy. Get nice and intense red as it gets off to the edge. Yellow to blend. Little bitty movements here. Back and forth. Like little X's. Okay, do the same thing on the other side. I'm trying to think about how I'm holding my brush. I don't hold my brush like I hold a pencil. I hold it more like this. Hold it however it's comfortable for you. There's no rules here. Nobody to tell you you're doing it wrong. If you're doing it, as far as I'm concerned, you're doing it right. If you're enjoying yourself, you're doing it right. There's a time and a place for art school and somebody to tell you, here's the rules. I like the phrase, know the rules so you can know how to properly break them. My favorite artist, Helen Frankenthaler, said there are no rules. If you get an area like this where you have a hard line and you don't like it, you can take a little white and use that opacity to soften the line. There. Okay. Once you're happy with the background, okay, now I don't want any of this reddy orangey to get in my blue right now. I don't mind red getting in it, but I don't want the yellow to get it because I want it to be a little purplish, but I don't want it to be, oops, you know what I forgot to do? I didn't wipe off the excess on my paper towel, and now I got my water all dirty. It happens. So the next time when I go to thin down my paint, it's going to be all orange. Okay. But now when I go to do my sky, I don't want any of that yellow in there because I don't want it to be greenish. I don't mind it being kind of purplish violet, but I don't want it to be greenish. So I'm going back and forth between red and blue. The blue that I'm using is a primary blue. It's kind of like a phthalo blue where it's got a little bit of a, like a turquoise tealy look to it. So kind of making it more to the violet is fine, like a deep midnight blue. I don't want to add black to it because I don't want it to be so dark and flat. But I also don't want it to lose the contrast when I go to add the tree branches. Because when you look out into the night sky, there should be enough light that you can see the black of the silhouette of the trees. It's rarely, at least in Washington, so dark that you don't see the silhouette of the trees. Not on a night when you see so many stars. Covering up all those white spots. Back and forth, brushy and blendy. All right, now I'm going to grab a little more red and kind of create this transition here. I'm going to take off some of the blue that's on there, because blue is a very powerful pigment that will overwhelm any other colors that it's mixed with. Kind of give us a little bit of a fade there. Okay. Now while, oops, see, I almost did it again. Now while that is drying, I'm going to come down and work down here in the green part of the hillside. So the green that I'm using, this phthalo green, is a pretty bluish green. If you want your hillside to be a little more yellowy, you can add some yellow to it, but that's still a pretty saturated green. If you want it to be a little more subdued, you can add a tiny bit of red, and that will make it a little more subdued of a green. It's also nice to make it more mottled, so it's not like a solid color. I kind of like, instead of mixing on the palette, you see how I will grab, I'll load my brush. That's all it means. When you load your brush, you just dip it in the paint, and you paint it on here. And then I will just like grab a corner of another color and mix it on straight on the canvas. And when you do that, you get a lot of nice irregularities, nice natural mixes like you might find out in the real world. Lights and darks and highlights and shadows. And I'm using the big brush for this because I want to cover it fairly quickly. If you are a precise painter, you have, I think, about 3 hours to do this, so you can do it more precise if you like. But even if you're going to do like very fine grass, blades of grass, you could probably still lay down a solid green and then put in some individual blades rather than building the whole thing out of individual blades of grass. And it's still nice to have some irregularities. I'm going to move that up so I can get all the way down off the edge. When I paint at Sip and Paints, I like to move from one area to another in a way that while that area is drying, you're painting this area over here. That way when you get back to that one, it's dry enough for you to maybe rest your hand on it while you do the details. And play with it and have fun. Gosh, life is so serious and so hard, and we just need playtime. Grown-ups of every age need playtime. And we all thought we wanted to be grown-ups because we wouldn't have people telling us what to do. Well, that was a lie. We still have people telling us what to do. And we lost our playtime. It's not fair, man. that paint on the table. Use the paint to redefine the edge on my brush. If you want to be precise, you want to use a smaller brush. If you want to be loose and gestural, you want to use a larger brush, because that forces you to not be too bogged down in the details. Okay, now for that hillside, I want to make sure, oh, that got really red right there. I want to make sure that I have enough paint to really clearly define my hillside. It's fine to have a little red on there, because it kind of emulates the red that's glowing on it. Doesn't really look red once you mix the red and the green together. It looks like a dark, dark brown. Okay, that's good coverage. All right, now I'm going to do the black silhouette. So I'm going to wipe off the excess, leave that in there, grab my smallest brush. Now this is a time you're probably going to, I'm going to turn this around so I can reach these little bits and pieces. So I want this to be fairly dry so I can rest my hand on here. So I'm going to want to wet my brush a little bit and thin it down. See, that's too thin. That's too much water. You want not a lot of water and a little paint, but you want just a little water in your paint to thin it down. And you see how I roll it to get the paint away from the handle and down toward the tip, and then you grab it with the tip. Now I designed this so the branches come to these nubs, but that gives you the opportunity to make your own. Okay, so you come down to the end there, but then you extend it yourself and come to a point. Now you can come off and think about this tree branch. You can make it as gnarly and twisted as you want. You can make them come off straight, or you can make them come off twisted. You can make a lot or a few. Yeah, if it is a little sticky, it's going to get on your arm. If you start away from it, then use just the tip to just glide and then apply more pressure as you get closer until you're laying the brush down flat. So I'm going to do that again where I'm not using my hand to obscure. Okay, so you're laying it down very lightly, and then you lay the brush down heavier as you get fatter. Right, I'm not going to do too many details because I want you guys to be able to do your own thing and instead of just listening to old me. But now's your opportunity to think like a tree. you'll see that if there's too much water, it doesn't cover nicely. It still looks kind of, I don't know, you can see through it, and you want it to be a nice thick silhouette. I'm going to go ahead and do all of this black. You just go ahead and take your time. Pause if you need to. Try to make sure to have there be no areas where the white shows through. And I'm going to come down here and do the same with the roots. Okay, I went ahead and finished up a few bits so you wouldn't have to watch me. The edges here, I want to make sure I use plenty of thick paint. Water it down, plenty of paint, so it's nice and goopy and I get a nice smooth line against the background. And then the roots don't have quite as many branchy areas as the tree branches, but they do branch out in a similar way. Okay, then wiping off the black from my brush, I'm going to wash off the tiny brush. This is the one I don't want to leave in the water. You see on this side, I took the time to make all the little branches, and this I'm really happy with. I didn't take the time on this one. So this is a side I would consider to be done and beautiful, and this is a side I would work on some more. You want to make sure that you're really happy with it. It's up to you if you want it to have that asymmetrical look. I mean, I think it looks really cool that way. It doesn't have to be symmetrical. It's your choice, creative choice. My napkin's a bit of a disaster, and if you need a new one, feel free to let us know. Okay, so for the branchy or the foliage, I'm going to use this rounded edge brush because I wanted to have kind of fluffy, roundy edges. And now there's no reason for you to, you can choose to have bare branches if you like. That's a perfectly lovely creative choice. But if you want to have fluffy, leafy branches, I'm going to lighten the green up a little bit. So start with the white, add some green, add some yellow, because we want it to stand out, and it's going to be lit by all of this light that's going on. And now that tiny bit of red to kind of diffuse that green, because we don't want it to be like, whoa, that's so intense. To just the right, oh yeah, that's just the right green. Okay, mix, 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 mix. Okay, now I'm turning it kind of on its side. And these are kind of dabbed on. Dab, 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 dab. This is a good place if you have any areas where you don't really like where the background turned out or that transition between. You can cover that up. And you want to have plenty of that green available for you. And you see I have that separate set of white for you over there? That is an area of white that you're going to leave clean for when you do your stars. Little red. Because that red neutralizes, and literally when you say neutralizes, it means makes it more neutral. Dab, dab, dab. I'm leaving some of the ends of the branches to peek out. And also, for as much as I sometimes have the branches peeking out, I can also have the foliage go beyond the tree, because there is the implication that there are some little wispy branches that are out there that we can't see. Okay, I'm happy with the overall shape of my tree. Now I'm going to add some more yellow and a bunch more white to that, because this is, after all, the tree of stars. So now I'm going to make myself a little path. Where you imagine that leaves have fallen. Well, these are some of those stars that have fallen. And it's lighter where they're glowing. And I want there to be enough paint on it so that you can't really see what's going on underneath. I want it to cover up what's going on below it. Oops. Okay, wiping off the excess. All done with that guy. Okay, and now we're going to do the stars, the final part. So while that's drying, let's turn this around. And we want some of the little stars to be pure white, but we want some of them to be like they're a little further behind. So let's do a mixture of blue and white. That's a little bit too blue, so let's do, there we go. As you see, a little paint goes a long way. And there isn't any of this amount of paint here that we used all of it. All right, now we're just going to go try to, as much as we can, just keep this guy rolled into a point and be random. And just, there we go. If they get in a regular shape, then make them a little bigger. There we go. I want to make sure that we have enough paint on our brush. Oops. And some of them are close together, and some are far apart, and some are big, and some are small. But this is a very full sky full of stars. Okay, and then after you've got your bunch of blue ones on, go ahead and do some plain white ones. This is where I go ahead and start doing some more, you know, big dramatic ones. Just a few. So a nice little pool, and then pull it straight up, straight down, straight over. And inevitably I get some that are crooked, and those are the ones that I say, oh well, you're just going to have more arms. And then I go back and add that brightness to the middle. And then I do that to the tree. And then I do that to the ground. And I add a few that are like coming off the horizon. And I'm going to let you finish this up on your own. Remember that art is for everyone. Thank you for coming.